Over 2,500 years ago, in the foothills of the Himalayas, a child was born who would transform the spiritual landscape of humanity. This is not a tale of conquest or empire, but something far more profound, a journey from absolute luxury to complete renunciation, and ultimately, to perfect wisdom. This is the story of Siddhartha Gautama, the man who became the Buddha. In the kingdom of Kapilavastu, King Suddhodana of the Sakya clan ruled with wisdom and strength. Yet despite his power, he and Queen Maya faced one persistent challenge. They had no heir to continue their lineage. Then came the dream. Queen Maya saw a magnificent white elephant bearing 6 tusks descend from the heavens and enter her womb. The royal priests were summoned, and their interpretation filled the palace with joy. The queen would bear a son destined for greatness. Months later, as spring blossoms painted the Lumbini gardens in brilliant colors, Queen Maya journeyed through this paradise. There, grasping the branch of a flowering sal tree, she gave birth to a radiant child. The infant seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, and even the most hardened courtiers sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. The king summoned Asita, the wisest sage in the land, to examine the newborn prince. But when the old man gazed upon the child, tears streamed down his weathered face. "Why do you weep?" the alarmed king demanded. "Is my son cursed?" "No, your majesty," Asita replied, his voice trembling with emotion. "I weep for myself. This child will achieve the ultimate truth I have sought my entire life. He will become either a great universal monarch or a fully enlightened being who will liberate countless souls from suffering. But I am old, and I will not live to hear his teachings." The sage's words planted a seed of fear in King Suddhodana's heart. He wanted an heir, not a wandering holy man. Determined to bind his son to the throne, the king constructed the most elaborate prison ever devised, one built not of bars and chains, but of silk, music, and endless pleasure. Young Siddhartha was confined to the palace grounds, surrounded by everything that could delight the senses. The king employed the most beautiful dancers, the finest musicians, and the most talented entertainers. Gardens bloomed with exotic flowers, fountains sparkled with crystal water, and every desire was fulfilled before it could even be spoken. The king issued strict orders. No one sick, elderly, or dying was to appear before the prince. Siddhartha was to see only youth, beauty, health, and happiness. The outside world, with all its harsh realities, was carefully hidden from view. As Siddhartha grew into a remarkable young man, intelligent, athletic, and compassionate, he excelled at everything. Yet despite his privileges, a peculiar restlessness stirred within him. The pleasures that surrounded him felt somehow hollow, like beautiful flowers with no fragrance. When he came of age, the king arranged his marriage to Princess Yashodara, renowned for her wisdom and grace. She was more than beautiful. She was Siddhartha's intellectual equal, and they shared a deep connection. Their joy seemed complete when she bore him a son, Rahula. The king breathed easier. Surely now, with a wife he loved and a child of his own, Siddhartha would forget any notions of seeking beyond the palace walls. He was wrong. Siddhartha, now 29 years old, persuaded his father to allow him to see the kingdom he would one day rule. Reluctantly, the king agreed but ordered that the route be carefully sanitized, every street swept, every beggar removed, only healthy and happy subjects allowed to appear. But fate, it seems, has a way of breaking through even the most careful plans. On his first venture outside, Siddhartha's chariot passed an elderly man, hunched and trembling, barely able to walk. The prince had never seen such a sight. "What has happened to this man?" he asked his charioteer, Channa. "That is old age, my lord. It comes to everyone who lives long enough." "Everyone? Even you? Even me?" "Yes, my lord. No one escapes it." The prince fell silent, his mind reeling. How could people go about their daily lives knowing such a fate awaited them? On his second journey, he encountered a man ravaged by disease, his body racked with pain and fever. Again, Channa explained this was the nature of existence. Illness strikes without warning, sparing no one. The third journey brought the most disturbing sight, a funeral procession, carrying a corpse wrapped in white cloth. Family members wailed in grief as they transported their loved one to the cremation ground. "Death, my lord," Channa said quietly. the end that awaits all living beings. Siddhartha felt as though the ground had opened beneath him. Everything he knew, his family, his pleasures, his very identity, was built on sand, temporary and ultimately meaningless in the face of such suffering. But it was the fourth encounter that changed everything. On his final journey, Siddhartha saw a wandering ascetic, a holy man who had renounced worldly life. Despite owning nothing, despite his simple robes and begging bowl, the man's face radiated a peace that Siddhartha had never seen, even in his palace of pleasures. That man has given up everything, Channa explained, in search of liberation from the cycle of suffering. In that moment, Siddhartha understood his destiny with perfect clarity. That night, unable to sleep, Siddhartha walked through his palace. He looked at the dancers and musicians who had collapsed in exhausted sleep, their mouths open, their carefully arranged hair in disarray. The illusion of eternal youth and beauty crumbled before his eyes. Here was the truth of impermanence, right in his own home. He entered his wife's chamber, where Yashodara slept with their infant son. His heart ached with love and sorrow. He knew what he had to do, but the cost would be immeasurable. "Forgive me," he whispered to his sleeping family. "I must find the answer to suffering, not just for myself, but for you, for our son, for all beings." Before dawn could break, Siddhartha cut his long hair with his sword, exchanged his princely robes for simple ochre cloth, and with only Channa and his horse Kinthaka, left the palace forever. At the edge of the kingdom, he sent Channa back with his jewelry and royal insignia. "Tell my father I leave not out of lack of love, but because of love, love for truth, and compassion for all who suffer." As he watched his loyal servant disappear back toward the palace, legend says that Kinthaka, his beloved horse, died of heartbreak. Siddhartha cremated the animal himself, then turned and walked alone into the forest. The prince was no more. The seeker had been born. Siddhartha sought out the greatest spiritual teachers of his age. First came Alara Kalama, who taught him to achieve deep meditative states where the mind could transcend all material awareness. Siddhartha mastered this teaching quickly, reaching states of consciousness his teacher had taken decades to achieve. "Stay with me," Alara Kalama urged. "Teach alongside me. You have nothing more to learn." But Siddhartha bowed respectfully and replied, "This is profound, but it is not the ultimate answer. These states are temporary. When I return from meditation, suffering still exists. This is not liberation. It is merely a very pleasant escape." He moved on to Udaka Ramaputta, another renowned master, and again quickly surpassed his teacher's attainments. Again, he realized that even the highest meditative states did not address the fundamental problem of existence. If the mind alone was not the answer, perhaps the body held the key. Siddhartha joined a group of 5 ascetics in the forest of Yeruvala. These practitioners believed that enlightenment required the complete mortification of the flesh, that by conquering bodily desires through extreme deprivation, one could achieve spiritual liberation. Siddhartha threw himself into these practices with the same intensity he had brought to his studies. He ate only a single grain of rice per day, then only a single sesame seed, then finally nothing at all. His body became skeletal, his skin drawn tight over his bones. He slept on beds of thorns, stood on one leg for days, held his breath until he lost consciousness. For 6 years, he pushed his body to the absolute limits of human endurance. The 5 ascetics were in awe. Surely, they thought, if anyone would achieve enlightenment through such dedication, it would be Siddhartha. But one day, as he sat in meditation, Siddhartha had a realization. He was so weak he could barely think clearly. His mind was foggy, his concentration broken by the constant pain and hunger. How could he find truth when he barely had the strength to contemplate? He remembered something from his childhood, sitting under a rose apple tree during a festival, naturally falling into a joyful, peaceful meditative state without any force or struggle. Could peace be found not through extreme indulgence or extreme denial, but through balance? When Siddhartha accepted a bowl of milk rice from a village woman named Sujata, his 5 companions were horrified. "You have given up. You are weak," they denounced him and left in disgust. But Siddhartha, eating slowly and mindfully, felt clarity returning to his mind. He understood something profound. Both extreme indulgence and extreme asceticism are forms of violence against oneself, and therefore ultimately against all beings. The truth, he realized, must lie in the middle path, neither luxury nor deprivation, but balance, moderation, and wisdom. Restored in body and clear in mind, Siddhartha walked to a large fig tree on the banks of the Naranja River. Something in him knew. This was the place, this was the time. He gathered a bundle of kusha grass and arranged it into a seat beneath the tree. Sitting down in a cross-legged posture, facing east toward the rising sun, he made a vow that would echo through the ages. Let my skin, my bones, my flesh dissolve into dust. I will not rise from this seat until I have attained perfect enlightenment. As Siddhartha settled into deep meditation, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Celestial beings gathered to witness what would unfold. But not everyone celebrated. Mara, the embodiment of delusion, desire, and death, recognized the threat this man posed to his dominion. If Siddhartha succeeded, he would show all beings the way out of the cycle of suffering, and Mara's power would diminish. Mara attacked with everything at his disposal. First came terror. Demonic armies with twisted faces and terrible weapons descended upon the meditating figure. Arrows flew toward him, but as they neared Siddhartha, they transformed into flower petals that fell harmlessly around him. Then came desire. Mara sent his daughters, craving, restlessness, and passion, who danced before Siddhartha in forms of irresistible beauty, promising every pleasure imaginable. But Siddhartha's mind remained unmoved, seeing through the illusion to the impermanent nature beneath. Finally, Mara tried doubt. Who are you to claim enlightenment? What gives you the right? Who will bear witness to your worthiness? In response, Siddhartha simply reached down and touched the earth with his right hand, the famous earth witness gesture. The earth itself is my witness, he declared. Through countless lifetimes, through endless acts of generosity, virtue, and compassion, I have earned this right. The earth trembled and spoke. I bear witness. Defeated, Mara withdrew. As the full moon rose high in the sky, Siddhartha's meditation deepened beyond anything he had previously experienced. In the first watch of the night, he recalled all his previous lives, thousands upon thousands of existences, each one a link in an endless chain. In the second watch, he perceived the entire universe of beings, how they arise, how they pass away, how they are reborn according to their actions, karma. He saw the vast web of cause and effect that binds all existence. In the third watch, he penetrated to the deepest truth. He understood the four noble truths about suffering and its cessation. He saw exactly how ignorance creates suffering, and exactly how that suffering can end. As dawn broke, Siddhartha Gautama opened his eyes. But the man who had sat down under the tree was gone. In his place sat the Buddha, the awakened one. For 7 days and nights, he remained beneath that tree, now called the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening, absorbing the profound implications of what he had realized. He had broken free from the cycle of birth and death. He had achieved nirvana, not as a place, but as the complete extinction of greed, hatred, and delusion. He was free. As the Buddha sat in the bliss of liberation, a question arose. Should he try to teach others what he had discovered? What he had realized was so subtle, so contrary to ordinary thinking, so difficult to express in words. Most people were deeply attached to their desires and opinions. Would they even be capable of understanding? Perhaps it would be better to simply remain in peaceful solitude. But then compassion arose in his heart. Though many might not understand, surely some would. Those with only a little dust in their eyes. For their sake, he must try. The Buddha thought of his 5 former companions, the ascetics who had left him. They had been sincere seekers, dedicated to the path. Perhaps they would be ready to hear his teaching. He traveled to the deer park at Sarnath, near Varanasi, where the 5 ascetics were practicing. When they saw him approaching from a distance, they agreed among themselves. Here comes Gautama, who gave up the path. We should not honor him. But as the Buddha drew closer, something had changed. His presence radiated such peace, such dignity, such luminosity that despite their intention to ignore him, all 5 found themselves rising to greet him respectfully. Friend Gautama, they said, trying to maintain some distance, you look different. The Buddha smiled gently. Do not call me friend, for I am no longer who I was. I have achieved the deathless. I have found the path to the end of suffering. If you will listen, I will teach you. They sat before him, and there, under the full moon, the Buddha gave his first teaching, turning the wheel of Dharma, explaining the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths that the Buddha revealed form the foundation of his entire teaching. The first noble truth, the truth of suffering, dukkha. Life contains suffering. This doesn't mean life is only suffering, but that unsatisfactoriness permeates existence. There is the obvious suffering of pain, sickness, aging, and death. But there is also the suffering of not getting what we want, of getting what we don't want, and even the subtle suffering of impermanence, knowing that everything we love will eventually change or end. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering, samadaya. Suffering arises from craving and attachment. We grasp at pleasures, trying to make them permanent. We cling to our opinions and sense of self. We crave existence itself, or, in despair, crave non-existence. This craving is rooted in ignorance, not understanding the true nature of reality, particularly the reality of impermanence, suffering, and the absence of a permanent, independent self. The third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, nirodha. There is a way out. Suffering can end completely. This state, nirvana, is achieved when craving is extinguished, when attachment is released, when ignorance is replaced by wisdom. Nirvana is not annihilation, but the ending of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is perfect peace, perfect freedom. The fourth noble truth, the path to the cessation of suffering, magga. The way to end suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical guide for daily life. Right view, understanding the Four Noble Truths and the nature of reality. Right intention, cultivating thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Right speech, speaking truthfully, harmoniously, gently, and meaningfully. Right action, acting ethically, not killing, stealing, or engaging in sexual misconduct. Right livelihood, earning a living in ways that don't harm others. Right effort, cultivating positive mental states and abandoning negative ones. Right mindfulness, maintaining awareness of body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Right concentration, developing deep meditative absorption. These 8 factors work together, each supporting the others, gradually transforming a person's understanding and way of being in the world. For 45 years, the Buddha walked the dusty roads of northern India, teaching anyone who would listen, from kings to beggars, from Brahmins to outcasts. His 5 former companions became his first disciples, all achieving enlightenment under his guidance. His Sangha, his community of followers, grew rapidly. Both men and women joined, unusual for that time and place. The Buddha taught in the language of the common people, not in the elite Sanskrit of the priests. He rejected the rigid caste system, insisting that enlightenment was available to anyone regardless of birth. He encouraged questioning. Don't believe something just because I say it, he taught. Test it in your own experience. He returned to his home kingdom, where his father, now elderly, greeted him with mixed emotions, pride at his son's achievement, but sorrow at what he had given up. His wife Yashodara, who had spent years in the pain of abandonment, finally understood the magnitude of what her husband had discovered and became a devoted follower herself. Most touching of all, his son Rahula, now a young man, asked to become his disciple. The Buddha accepted, and Rahula became an exemplary monk, known for his humility and dedication. The Buddha established monasteries, created guidelines for monastic life, and carefully trained teachers to carry on his work. He survived opposition, assassination attempts, and false accusations, meeting all challenges with equanimity. In his 80th year, after a meal offered by a blacksmith named Kunda, the Buddha became seriously ill. He knew his time had come. Despite his suffering, he made one final journey, stopping to rest in a grove of sal trees near Kushinagar. There, he lay down on his right side, his head pointing north, in the lion's posture. His attendant Ananda, who had served him devotedly for decades, broke down weeping. The world will be dark without your light, Master. The Buddha comforted him. Ananda, do not grieve. Haven't I always taught that everything that arises must pass away? Even this body, even this life. I have given you the teachings. I have shown you the path. Now you must be lights unto yourselves. He gave his final instructions to the assembled monks. All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently for your liberation. Then, passing through increasingly refined states of meditation, the Buddha entered final nirvana, parinirvana, the complete ending of the cycle of rebirth. The earth shook. The sal trees burst into bloom out of season, showering petals upon his body. His body was cremated with great ceremony, and his relics were divided among various kingdoms, enshrined in stupas that became centers of pilgrimage and devotion. The Buddha never claimed to be a god, a prophet, or a savior. He was, he said, simply someone who was awake to the true nature of reality, awake to the path of liberation. His teachings spread across Asia, adapting to each culture while maintaining their essential core. In Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Myanmar, the Theravada tradition preserved the earliest teachings. In Tibet, China, Japan, and Korea, Mahayana Buddhism developed new interpretations and practices. In the modern era, Buddhism has reached every continent, offering its wisdom to new generations. But perhaps the Buddha's most radical message was this: don't believe anything simply on authority, not even his own words. Test everything in the laboratory of your own experience. The truth is not out there to be believed, but in here to be discovered. 25 centuries have passed since a prince walked away from his palace in search of answers. The path he discovered, through balance, mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion, remains as relevant today as it was then. For the question he asked still echoes in every human heart: how can we find peace in a world of impermanence? How can we live with meaning when death is inevitable? How can we be happy when suffering touches every life? The Buddha's answer was revolutionary in its simplicity. Stop running. Stop grasping. Stop fighting reality. Instead, wake up. See clearly. Act with compassion. Walk the middle path. The journey from Prince to Buddha is not just his story. It's an invitation to each of us to begin our own journey toward awakening.